Senator from Nebraska, Senator Fischer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Blumenthal. As a cattle rancher, I thank you for your respect of my privacy. I would like to thank both of you for calling the hearing today so we can focus on managing that big data with new technologies for our nation's farmers and ranchers. Not only will this help boost productivity, but advancements in digital analytics can improve how we feed our communities and conserve our natural resources. In fact, Tim Hasinger of Lindsay Corporation from Omaha, Nebraska, noted at last week's Internet of Things hearing that the combined yield enhancement and resource savings from new technologies can increase the American farmers' profits by an average of $40 per acre. And I would like to please submit for the record follow-up materials that Lindsay has provided regarding its research on data analytics and irrigation management, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Knopf, in your testimony, you describe your farm management operations. And what benefit do you see on your farm from implementing big data technology? How do you analyze it? Do you have input from your nutritionist, your equipment dealer, local co-op? How do you get it all put together?
That's a good question. There's a lot of information to try to analyze, and so in our farm, that answer is going to look different for each individual farm, of course, on the strengths and talents and the passions of that individual farm operator. Some farmers are very passionate about their data, very passionate about precision agriculture, and they want to be very hands-on in that process. And those are also, I think, the guys that are very passionate about the ownership and transparency of that data. They want an honest server in their office. There's the other spectrum of farmers, and we're kind of in the middle, let me say that. There's the other spectrum of farmers, and sometimes it changes based on age demographics as well. I've noticed in my community, in my experience, and thinking about our own farm, the older generation is much more private about their data, very unwilling to share it. The younger generation is, they grew up with smartphones and Google's tracking them all the time and telling them things about themselves that they didn't know already, and so they're more used to that. So there's a generational change there as well. For us, we're kind of in the middle of, I have an agronomic background from Kansas State. I have a young man that works, we have one full-time employee that also is an agronomist, and we do most of our data analysis in-house. But our data is stored in a software system that is web-based. So, and it's subscription-based, and that was a big change for us about 2 years ago, three to 4 years ago, is transitioning our data from being stored in-house to web-based, which is somewhat of an uncomfortable step because you feel like you're losing control, and that's why the transparency is so important. But we are still processing a lot of the data and analyzing a lot of it in-house. But there is a growing amount of service providers dealing with that. We collaborate a lot with our land grant with Kansas State University. A lot of their research we collaborate with and host on our farm, so that's a very important collaboration. I appreciate two representatives here from universities as well.
And as you noted in your testimony, the ag economy is in a downward cycle right now. It's hurting. I also know that there's a lack of access to broadband, and we have a lot of slow downloading speeds. And how does that affect your bottom line when you have this slow access?
Yes, excuse me. That has a very significant impact. In fact, the county that we live in is just now receiving fiber optics ran 2 farms. In fact, it's not even hooked up yet. It's just being ran right now, being buried, because a lot of my peers that lived in more, we have a community of about 40 to 50,000 within our county, but yet there's still a lot of rural part of the county. So a lot of my colleagues that lived in rural counties in Kansas qualified for grants from the government to help build that initial infrastructure. Well, our county happened to not qualify because of the urban center that we had within that counties. And our broadband, we have some broadband antennas on top of elevators and towers and so forth, but it is very unreliable and fairly slow. So that has limited our utilization and access of data, particularly in a web-based software platforms, and been an economic disadvantage in utilization of data because we are kind of caught in the middle of that, that process.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.